Hello, class. This week we are examining two different chapters in our text, Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Chapter 2 addresses the ethical, legal, and professional issues in assessment and testing. The ethical codes of our professional associations really provide us with the guidelines on how to respond in certain situations. We immediately turn to ACA, the American Counseling Association, and APA, the American Psychological Association. Many of the issues that are outlined cover these topics, as noted on the slide and in the text. These are a bullet point list of quite important aspects, perhaps some of which you did not think about, or oftentimes we may take for granted or perhaps not focus enough attention on. When it comes to testing and assessing our clients, it's essential that we use appropriate instruments that are reliable, valid, and sensitive to the needs of our clients. We will specifically be taking a look at that in another chapter. Choosing the right test makes a significant impact, of course, on the accuracy of the results and the decisions that are made on those results. In terms of competence, we have three levels of testing within our field, and the broader field of psychology and counseling. Level A tests are those that can be administered, scored, and interpreted by non-psychologists. That would be us in the clinical mental health field as clinical mental health counselors. Level B tests require knowledge of construction, use, and appropriate advanced coursework in psychology and related courses. And then level C tests require that advanced psychology degree or licensure, and advanced training or supervision experience in that particular test. Confidentiality is a critical aspect of assessment and testing, particularly in our field. In all fields, it is essential that we uphold the confidentiality of our clients who are undergoing testing and assessment so that we protect their privacy and maintain trust in the relationship between them and the evaluator. When giving a test or conducting a broad assessment of a client, keeping information of confidentiality is critical in the assessment process. It's important that we follow guidelines that are part of our ethical clinical practice as outlined by codes of ethics, and it's also important that we understand there are state laws. The importance of keeping information confidential is our professional responsibility. It can be contradicted at times by law. Sometimes we have to grapple with those difficult dilemmas where our professional responsibility appears like it's rubbing against law. We need to check the laws of our state. We are typically and most generally, I should say, and most often, 99% of the time, on fairly solid professional and legal ground. There are conditions, however, where confidentiality is to be broken. If a client is in danger of harming self or others, If a client's a minor or legally incompetent, and the law states that the parents or the guardian have the right to the information about that person. Thirdly, if the client asks us to break confidentiality. And fourth, if we need to defend ourselves against charges filed by a client. There are instances when we are also being asked to break confidentiality and privileged communication related to the court, revealing information, perhaps when necessarily to benefit the client, and when we have a written agreement to reveal information to a specific source. In today's globalized world, cross-cultural sensitivity is essential in all aspects of life, and including assessment and testing. When it comes to evaluating individuals from different backgrounds, we need to consider their unique beliefs, their values, and their experiences to ensure fair and accurate results. Assessment and testing are often used to measure an individual's knowledge, skills, abilities. However, traditional standardized tests may not always provide an accurate representation of that person's capabilities, especially when the tests are not culturally sensitive. There are tests that are biased towards a particular culture and may disadvantage individuals from other cultural backgrounds. This then leads to inaccurate results. To promote cross-cultural sensitivity, it's important for us to consider a few factors. One, language. Tests should be presented in a language that is familiar to the test taker. It's important to avoid using any kind of slang or idiomatic expressions. Second, cultural references. We need to avoid using cultural references that may not be familiar to all test takers. Third, values and beliefs. Different cultures have different values and beliefs. That which we identify as their worldview may impact their responses to test items. It's important that we be aware of those and to avoid making assumptions. Fourth, inclusive assessment methods. That we seek to use a variety of assessment methods to ensure that our clients from different cultural backgrounds have the opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and skill in ways that are meaningful to them. And fifth, I make a point about professional development. As educators, as clinicians in the field, as potential researchers, as myself as a researcher, as test developers, there needs to be ongoing and repeated ongoing training on cultural competencies, cultural sensitivity, cultural humility, to ensure that assessments and tests are fair and unbiased. And that these trainings continually continue to expand upon cultural competence, cultural awareness, and ways to adapt assessments and tests for different cultural groups. Informed consent ensures that clients obtain all the information about the nature and purpose of the aspects of an assessment or test process, and that they give permission to be assessed or tested. Generally, tests should give test administrators, we need to give our clients information about the assessment process and have obtained the client's permission to be assessed. There are times when informed consent does not need to be obtained, such as when it's implied. This is specific to achievement tests within schools, when testing is mandated by courts, to name a few. The ethical codes acknowledge that to some degree all tests invade privacy, and therefore they highlight the importance of a client's understanding of how their privacy might be infringed upon. Concerns of invasion of privacy are lessened as the client is then able to give informed consent, that they have a real choice in accepting or refusing testing, and they know the limits of confidentiality, as was just noted. Due to the delicate nature of diagnoses, our ethical codes emphasize the important role that we as professionals play when deciding which assessment techniques to use in formulating a diagnosis. Test data can be and has been misused. Ethical codes assert that data should only be released to others if the client has given their consent. The release of data is generally only given to individuals who can adequately interpret the test and to those who will not misuse the information. Additionally, our ethical codes reinforce the notion that tests should be administered in a way that is in accord with the way that they were established and standardized. That means that any alteration to that process should be noted and interpretations of the test data adjusted if testing conditions were not ideal. Ethical codes remind us that it is our responsibility to make reasonable efforts to ensure the integrity of test content and the security of the test itself. We must never duplicate tests or change test material without the permission of the publisher. Ethical codes highlight the fact that when scoring tests and interpreting results, we should reflect on test worthiness in terms of reliability, validity, cross-cultural fairness, and practicality, and how that might affect any results. Results should always be couched in terms that reflect any potential problems with test interpretation. Partly a response to criticism of the manner in which tests have been used and abused over the years, a number of standards in assessment and testing to help guide have been developed in recent years. These standards delineate the proper use of assessment techniques. The standards for qualifications of test users, standards for multicultural assessment, rights and responsibilities of test takers, standards for educational and psychological testing, just to name a few. Additionally, there are competencies specific for testing in school counseling, mental health counseling, marriage, couple and family counseling, career counseling, and substance abuse counseling. Because ethical codes can be limiting in their ability to guide a practitioner who potentially is facing a thorny, prickly ethical dilemma, it's important that other avenues are available to aid in ethical decision-making. For instance, some practitioners might use moral models in guiding ethical decision-making. One such moral model suggests that there are 6 critical moral principles to consider when making difficult ethical decisions. They include autonomy, which has to do with protecting the independence, self-determination, and freedom of clients; non-maleficence, which is the concept of do no harm when working with clients; beneficence, which is related to promoting the good of society, which can be at least partially accomplished by promoting the client's well-being; justice, or fairness, in that we're providing equal and fair treatment to all our clients; fidelity is related to maintaining trust, that we keep conversations confidential in the counseling relationship, and that we are committed to our clients within the dynamics of that, the fidelity of that professional relationship; and veracity, which has to do with being truthful and genuine with our clients, all within the context of the counseling relationship. The problem-solving model is an 8-step process. Step 1, we identify the problem. Step 2, identify the potential issues involved. Step 3, we review relevant ethical guidelines. Step 4, we know the relevant laws and regulations. Step 5, we obtain consultation. Step 6, we consider the various possible courses of action. Step 7, we list and identify the consequences of those various courses of action. And step 8, we decide the best course of action. The ethical, moral, and cognitive development model, in that our own development affects how one makes a decision, and that a higher level of development is relates to that more complex ethical decision making. Legal issues and assessment. We, in the educational field, as a professor and you as student, are very clear about the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act that applies to all schools that receive federal funds, and that there are rights to your educational record, and that includes test records. So FERPA comes into play. We have HIPAA, right, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. This restricts the information is shared, that can be shared, and that will never be shared without client consent. This allows clients to access their records. Then we have privileged communication laws. And the said noted court case, Jaffe versus Redmond. We have the Freedom of Information Act. We have the Civil Rights Act. All of these actually have aspects of legal issues in assessment. We have the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We have Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. We have the Carl Perkins Act of 2006. In terms of professional associations and issues, we have ACA. And within that, we have the Association for Assessment and Research in Counseling. This is a great association to check out, to refer to. Oftentimes, there are articles, there are guidelines, that come from this association, and they speak to measurement and evaluation within counseling and development, and also report on counseling outcome research and evaluation. We have APA and Division 5, which is specifically speaks to evaluation, measurement, and statistics. And again, there are journals and articles that speak to psychological assessments and psychological methods of testing, etc. We have professional issues in terms of accreditation. Professional organizations, of course, creates curriculum standards. We have that in terms of your clinical mental health counseling program here at Bletchley Lutheran College, and in terms of the accreditation by CACREP, the Council for Accreditation of Counseling and Related Educational Programs. A couple other organizations that create curriculum standards include the APA and the National Association of School Psychologists. We have professional issues around forensic evaluations. This addresses the need for accurate assessments for courts and court cases. There are forensic evaluators who are credentialed to do forensic assessment and testing. Many have been psychologists, and there has been an expansion into counselors and social workers. And you can be credentialed to complete forensic assessments and testing. The psychology board is for psychologists comes from the board in forensic psychology through the American Board of Forensic Psychology. Then for us in the counseling and social work world, we have certification through the National Board of Forensic Evaluators. As you can see, common areas for forensic evaluation, we have court and legal issues that are civil oriented. Oftentimes there's within this, we're talking about the interpersonal relationships of court custody, parental rights, divorce, mediation, right? We have employment litigation, issues around guardianship, personal injury, harassment, discrimination, etc. Within the criminal court, in criminal legal issues, we have the juvenile waiver, juvenile sentencing. We have the competency right hearings, right, and competency assessment. Are you competent to stand trial? Are you competent to be sentenced? Are you competent to waive your Miranda rights? Competency in terms of the insanity defense, diminished capacity, just to name a few. A good assessment will involve a number of different kinds of instruments, including formal tests, informal instruments, and that clinical interview. In addition, tests tend to not to measure certain aspects of a person, such as their motivation, their intention, and focus of attention. And one should always consider how cultural factors impact test results. Ultimately, as an examiner, we should take into account test scores, multiple assessment procedures, these individual traits that I just named, and cultural factors, because all of these can impact the results when making suggestions and decisions about the client. What I've just described then is that we need to look at assessment as a holistic process so that we obtain a broad, accurate view of our clients versus just relying on one test. Lawsuits have questioned the accuracy of tests, and many laws have been passed to preventing the use of tests. Research has been conducted that demonstrates the negative impact that some tests can have, especially on minorities and women. I believe in the future we're going to continue to see an increased emphasis on understanding the inherent bias within assessments and tests, and that new tests that are less biased need to be created, and new efforts to properly administer and score and interpret and understand need to also be examined and explored, because those processes have bias. You all are very much moving into what could be the trenches of that work. It is very slightly ever beginning, and this is critical to the continuing advancement and the importance of ethical responsibility to our clients. So these are the issues that you will be grappling with as you move into the field, and the evolution of these issues continue to emerge in our ever global, expanding clinical pool of clients that I work with and that you work with, and even more so that you'll be working with. Additional cross-cultural issues, as were named on the end of the previous slide and this one as well. Basically, I summed these points up in the comments that I shared with you. Here are the final 3 points. If you have an aversion to using assessment procedures and you act on it, you're not being fair to your clients. This is because testing and assessment procedures help clients know who they are, why they behave the way they do, and what they're good at, and what choices to make. Multiple assessment procedures should always be considered for our clients if we are to give them the most effective service possible, and also, I believe, be ethically sound. To not do so brings fears and biases into the dynamics of our relationship as counselor and client.